Graphic warning. This is a disturbing story that happened to me about 4 years ago. It was around December. The snowstorms were starting to come in, and it was becoming very cold. Me and my wife were trying to get everything we could before winter started, mainly food and supplies. The problem is that we didn't have a car. We couldn't afford it. I worked a low-wage job and was making enough to barely pay rent on our shitty old apartment. My wife usually stayed home and took care of our 2-month-old baby, and I was doing the best I could to save enough money for a car. And finally, after months of saving, I had enough. One day I came home and told my wife the good news, and she was relieved. The next day we went to our local car dealership. There was only 2 cars on the lot, and they weren't the greatest, but the prices were very low, and as long as it got us from point A to point B, we would be happy. So we did what we needed to, paid for it, got the keys, and drove off. The car was from 1984 and was pretty run down, but it drove just fine. 6 months later, I was cleaning out the car when I noticed something odd under the back seat. It was something that I had never seen before. Despite having checked the car multiple times at this point, I looked closer, but I would need a flashlight in order to see it clearly. It looked like a black box of some kind. I thought it was just something the previous owner had left behind. Finally, curiosity got the best of me and I pulled it out of the car. It was an old VHS tape, marked Happy Memories. It looked to be around the same age as the car. I didn't know what to do with it. I just thought it was some old home video from the previous owner, although it was pretty strange that it was hiding underneath the seat. While I didn't want to invade anyone's privacy, I decided that I wanted to see what was on the tape to satisfy my curiosity. I went up to my attic and found my old VHS player. I hadn't used it since high school, back when I threw parties and me and my buddies would watch movies on it. It was a bit dusty, but it still worked just fine. I turned it on and put in the tape. It started off pretty normal. It was a family during Christmas, people walking around, opening gifts, etc. Then things got a little uncomfortable. The husband and wife began arguing while the children were crying in the background. The argument got more and more intense as it went on. I could not make out exactly what was being said. The camera cut off and the screen was black, before cutting back into a scene that was so fucked up that it kept me up for weeks after. I will never get this image out of my head. The camera was now set up in a dark room. There was torture weapons hanging from the walls and dismembered body parts scattered across the floor. The same wife and children from the beginning were now on their knees chained together and sobbing. That's about as much detail as I'm willing to go into. There was also a man in the room whose face was cut off from the camera's view. The man stepped out of frame and switched off the overhead light. And what he said next won't stop repeating in my head. I guess this is a happy memory for someone like me. After that, all that was heard was the horrified screams of the family. I had to turn off the tape. I couldn't take it anymore. I took the tape out and just stared at it for what seemed like hours. The images of the bodies, all the blood, the terrified faces of the family were now burnt into my mind. It was hours before I said a single word to anyone. I eventually called the police and explained what I had found. After weeks of investigation, they found out that this tape was of a family who had gone missing 32 years ago. They said that their house was demolished in 2003, and a car dealership was built in its place. The exact same place where I got the car. That's when it hit me. Thinking back, the car salesman looked a lot like the husband from the beginning of the video, except a lot older. Now that I think about it, he was kind of in a hurry to get us out of there after we bought the car, shortly after the shop was closed down, and is now abandoned. A lot of my friends went there over the years and said it was a really good place for a cheap car. I would pass it every day driving to work. I'm assuming the police followed up on all of this during their investigation, but I never heard of any arrests being made or further updates on the case. As far as I know, that man is still out there. I'm currently working as an intern at a historical society. That's not what the story is about. That's only important so you know that I kinda have a thing for preserving the past. I really love looking through other people's stuff, but mostly I'm a bit of a hoarder. I hoard a lot of stuff, but one of the things I love the most is old bootleg VHS tapes. You see, the thing is that there was a phase in American life where anybody could put anything on a VHS tape, and it would just sit there, secret and hidden, for months until someone else played it. VHS tapes are even vulnerable in a way, because water can erase them. It's almost like they are these sad, lost kids. Anyways, I got boxes and boxes of tapes in the basement. I wanted to share with you one of the spookier ones. So the cover, because covers are important, is a Scotch T120 with scratch marks all over it. It looks like it was tossed out of a car window and dragged along the asphalt. I found it at a Goodwill store. The label is the kind that came with the tape, and it just says, trees. Unfortunately, I'm unable to show you what's on the tape, but here's basically what happens. It starts off with static, then cuts to footage of a line of 50-foot Norwegian pines. They have branches that sort of hang down. They look heavy. The sky is near twilight. There's blips in the audio and around the edges of the video. There are 6 trees in the frame. Clouds slowly pass overhead. A man says, "See? Look at them." The video goes on for about another minute, slightly wobbling in the man's hands. Around the bottom of the trees, you can see a dirt road with churned up tracks, like a bulldozer has recently been through. "Look! Yeah, I saw you. You can't hide. Danny says I'm crazy, and..." The man trails off, then keeps going on in a sing-along voice. "I'm going to find you, I'm going to show him. You keep changing, every time I drive by, I see you at me. He doesn't believe me, there in the branches. Danny, I'm gonna show you this." A hand appears on the left of the frame and tries to outline a certain tree. It's a stubby hand, normal looking. The first time I saw it, I imagined the camera guy was wearing a Chicago Bears windbreaker. "Danny, look here. Look at the branches." Then the tape cuts. It's early morning, at the same stand of trees. "See? See? Don't you see?" A construction worker then walks into frame.
"Hey you! Hey buddy, what are you doing here? Get the fuck out of..."
The tape cuts to static. When it cuts back, it's inside of a shitty apartment. Sparse furnishings, a dirty black futon, white dirty walls, ashtrays, empty beer cans standing on a glass coffee table. The camera focuses on the ashtray, and you can hear the man talking off camera. It literally is 30 minutes of whispering. I've tried to decipher it, but I can't. He says trees and bushes a whole bunch of times, but I can't pick out much more. At the end, the camera suddenly whips to the right, into the kitchen, and the man gasps. Despite his whole diatribe, it seems he wasn't really expecting anything to happen to him. And even though there's no sound on the tape, before it whips around, he acts like he's just been snuck up on, like some kind of loud noise has happened that only he can hear. "Who's there? Danny? Is that you?" Cut to the trees again, this time closer and from the opposite side. It seems the cameraman is hiding behind a stand of overgrown bushes. "Okay, so I got a different angle now. Danny, look. Look hard. Look hard at the places where the branches meet the trees. In the shadows there, you can see them moving. It's kind of tough because of the light, but Danny, trust me, you're the only one who gives a shit anymore." This is kind of awkward because the man gets choked up. "Danny, please tell me you see them. Sometimes they climb down. Sometimes they..." You can hear another construction worker come up. There's a scuffle and the camera gets taken away and turned off. The thing is though, and I only caught this because I watched it twice. There's a few frames where you can actually see something. Just before the construction guy interrupts, while the man is turning the camera down and onto the ground, there are several frames where you can see a dark figure beneath the trees. I slowed this down and gone by frame. There's a person there, just squatting. It's a black outline without features. It doesn't move. It seems to be holding its hands together, resting its elbows on its bowed knees. It doesn't seem to have hair or clothes. I have no idea what the fuck it is. I would show you a still shot, but after messing around with the tape, it snapped inside the VCR. I tried examining it under the light, but all the frames that had the mysterious figure are permanently damaged. Sometimes I have to close my blinds and curtains to make sure the movement of the trees outside my windows doesn't make it in. I just get nervous that I might see arms or legs, or that human figure climbing among the branches. A couple years ago, I found this old VHS tape at my grandparents' house. I know this is kind of cliche, but it was a nondescript tape with no markings on it. It wasn't on the shelf with the other tapes and the few DVDs that my grandparents owned. It was buried in the backyard, inside a metal box. You may be wondering why I found a buried tape in the backyard. That's a fair question. I got a little carried away with my younger brother's metal detector one afternoon. I swear he's such a dork. He bought it online and he was taking the damn thing down the beach almost every other day. When my grandfather passed away, he decided to give it a whirl in their backyard. Moreover, according to my dad, they would bury all sorts of things back there as kids. What I didn't expect to find, though, was a metal box containing a VHS tape. It was buried behind the shed, several feet down. I was surprised that the metal detector was able to pick up on something that was buried that deep. I was all alone when I found it, so I didn't exactly go and tell it on the mountain, if you know what I mean. Initially, I thought it must have been some kind of fun, cutesy thing my grandparents did. I wouldn't put it past them to bury something in the backyard, then forget all about it. Maybe it was their wedding tape or something. But then I had this sinking feeling. A premonition, really. Whatever it wasn't supposed to be found, especially by me. I waited until I knew I could have a little time alone. I took one of the old VCRs from my grandparents' house and attached it to a TV in the garage, and then I proceeded to play the tape. It was fuzzy and grainy because, it was a really old tape. But then I started to get a little creeped out. For the first 2 minutes or so, the camera was just focusing on an old chair in some dimly lit room. I kept straining my eyes, trying to tell what was happening. The video seemed to freeze and then come back into motion. All the while, the chair was there on the foreground, resting against the wall. Then a hooded figure walked into the room. In his right hand was a knife. In his other, he held a young girl by the wrists. She looked like she was a teenager. She was blindfolded and her arms were tied behind her back. A piece of tape was over her mouth. The hooded figure then put her in a chair and then walked out of frame. He kept walking up to her and patting her on the head, and then he would walk out of frame again. I turned up the volume, but all I could hear was muffled sounds, like the camcorder that was used had a nearly broken microphone. Everything was garbled and incoherent. I started feeling sick, like I was watching something disgusting. Every part of my inside started to churn. I could feel the vomit rising inside me. I didn't want to watch another second of the tape, but I just had to know what it was. For the next few minutes, it was just footage of the girl sitting in the chair, her hands bound behind her back. She appeared to be talking or crying. I couldn't be sure because of the quality, and I could barely make out anything as I watched. It was super unsettling. It was just this girl tied to a chair, and some person in a cloak with a knife who was nowhere to be seen. I started to feel like I was watching an actual horror movie. I wanted the girl to get up and run out of the room. I wanted someone to storm in and set her free, but I had this sinking feeling that this was not how the movie ended. Unfortunately, I was right. The hooded figure returned. He walked over to the girl and lifted her chin with his free hand. The look in her eyes cracked my soul in two. Then the figure pulled his cloak back. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was my grandfather. I turned the tape off and ejected it. I held it in my hands, wondering what I should do with it. Destroy it? Turn it into the authorities? I don't know why, but I put the tape back in the metal box and walked around the corner of the tool shed and placed it where I had dug it up. I threw it back into the earth and began piling dirt on it again. All I could think of was trying to bury what I had found, hiding the evidence that was now making me sick. That's when I heard my grandmother's voice behind me. "What are you doing?" she asked. I looked up at her smiling face, those innocent eyes. She was the sweetest person I knew. I couldn't dare risk her knowing what I had unearthed. The thought of her knowing what was on that tape, knowing that her husband of 50+ years had this dark, horrible obsession, just killed me. So I lied the best I could. "Oh, nothing, Grandma. I just thought I found something buried back here, but I was wrong." Her face turned from the normal relaxed smile she usually wore to a cold stare. My heart sank. Grandma took a couple of steps closer to me, her eyes staring deep into mine. Her expression was solemn and serious. "That tape was buried for a reason. You weren't supposed to ever see it." She sighed emphatically. "But now that you know, I might as well show you everything else. Follow me." My stomach was hot and heavy as I followed my grandmother back inside. She walked slowly, like someone who was trying to stall. We walked in silence past her pristine clean kitchen and into the hallway. I couldn't help but look at the family photos that lined both hallways. Right in the middle was our massive family portrait, next to this ironic picture of my grandparents at their wedding. I always loved looking at this picture growing up. They both looked so young and so happy, like there was nothing in the world that could defeat their love. Part of me wondered now if that was part of the problem. Grandma kept walking past the bedrooms, to the back of the house where the basement was. Of course she's taking me to the basement, I thought. This was all too real, too stereotypical, too unnerving. She unlocked the basement door and took a deep breath. We stood there in silence for a moment before she spoke. "I'm not proud of this, but sometimes you have to deal with the, complications of the person you love. Grandma, please, you don't have to show me anything. Honest. No, you need to know. It's time that you knew the truth." She smiled faintly at me, her eyes moist with tears. We started down the steps. One by one we walked, down the rickety staircase my grandpa always swore was dangerous, which is why we never went into the basement. But also he kept the damn thing padlocked all the time. My dad would always say it was for safety reasons. We believed him. Why the hell wouldn't we? We stood on the cold cement floor. A bitter draft blew through. I shivered as I waited for Grandma to turn on the lights. When she did, I was surprised. The basement was ordinary in every way imaginable. It was mainly dusty boxes piled in the corners, and a few old knickknacks and relics placed here and there. I heard Grandma take another deep breath. My chest ached at the sound. "Your grandfather had a problem. It began when he was a young boy, and the war didn't help much either." I don't know why, but I just blurted out, "Was he a murderer?" My grandma turned. Tears dripped down her cheeks. She forced a smile as she wiped them away. "He had a lot of issues. That tape you saw was part of it. He kept that part of him hidden for years, all the while your dad and aunt were growing up. He was the perfect father. I didn't know about any of this, but one day I came down here to look for some Christmas decorations my sister, your great aunt Sally, said that she had loaned me. I never found it, but I did find a small door built into the wall." My grandma showed me in a small alcove was a tiny door built into the wall. It looked like a whimsical feature, something that you would find in Alice in Wonderland. It was the exact same color as the stone wall, except it had a dark brass doorknob and a lock. I never knew it existed, so naturally, I never tried to open it. I thought maybe it was your grandpa's secret treasure trove room. Boys love to collect and conceal their prizes, so I figured that's what it was. I was able to jimmy the lock open, but what I found," she paused, catching her breath, wiping her eyes again. "Well, you know what I found, don't you? I found a tape. But not just one. There were several of them." My grandma opened the tiny door to the wall and showed me what was inside. It was like a miniature Blockbuster in there. Shelves lined the walls, enough space to house hundreds of tapes. But it was empty. Completely empty. "Here's where I found them, all lined up along the wall. He had magazines too. Dirty, dirty magazines. I couldn't talk to him for weeks, but then I finally confessed what I had found, and we talked through it." None of this made any sense to me. Why the hell would you go on living like everything was completely fine if you had a psychopath living in the room with you, compiling his awful sex tapes? I didn't understand. At first, he promised to stop. He told me that he made his last tape and that it would never happen again. He told me all the girls in the tapes were misfits and troublemakers. They were lost girls that didn't have homes or morals. He was doing the world a favor, he said, ridding the world of unwanted women who would become pregnant and end up on welfare. And the sad thing is, I believed him. And I guess I agreed too. I stood there trying to find the words, but I was empty. Any notion of my grandparents' character disintegrated in that moment. I was enraged. I felt sick, angry, and betrayed, like my whole life and the legacy handed to me was a lie. Did my parents know? Did they care? Or were they as nonchalant about it as my grandma? I wanted to scream. I wanted to curse her out because this was twisted, sick shit. How could he? And how could you allow it? My grandma cupped my face in her hands, like she used to do when I was younger. She looked into my eyes. "You're a good soul. Some aren't so lucky, sweetie. Your grandpa had his demons." This was all too much. I started to pace back and forth. I didn't know what to say or what to think. None of it made any sense. "But why didn't you turn him in? Why did you let him have this sick obsession?" "I tried to fight him on it at first, but something changed in me, I guess." I looked at her, still confused, still in shock. "What are you saying? Where are the rest of the tapes?" My grandma smiled slightly at me, her dark brown eyes dry from tears. They locked into mine. I stared into them, and they were empty and void. After I couldn't get your grandpa to stop, I accepted my fate. All I could do was help him. "What? You helped him?" I would hold the camera. My heart was beating hard and fast. It was too much. Way too much. "Where are the tapes?" "After your grandfather passed, I buried them, one by one in the backyard. I couldn't bear the thought of destroying our work, but I knew that no one could ever see them." She paused and looked at me. "Unless, of course, you want to watch them." My grandma moved around the corner of the alcove, past the small door where the tapes had been concealed. She held up a suit bag and placed the bag on a hook on the wall. She unzipped the bag and held out its contents. It was a black robe with a hood. She smiled sadistically at me as she held it in her hands. "He would want you to have this," she said.
There's always a reason to be afraid.